what else do we have left to talk about heading into Brazil? If you watched the episode last week and you watched my commentary on Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, the championship battle, that's what everybody's talking about. That's what everybody's conversation is probably going to center around. That's going to be the highlight of this Grand Prix weekend. And there's only but so much really you can say that as you walk into every single one of these Grand Prix Sundays that everybody else hasn't kind of already said. But I did want to highlight that there are some other battles happening up and down the paddock, right? There are other things happening that are still worth noting and other things that are still worth talking about, to be completely frank. And I really wanted to just kind of dive into some of these other points where maybe you're not a McLaren fan. Maybe you're not the biggest supporter of Lando Norris. Maybe you're not the biggest supporter of Oscar Piastri. Maybe you don't really care who wins the World Drivers' Championship. You're looking for something else to kind of hang your hat on, to kind of really get invested in. But there's other storylines as you walk up and down this paddock, starting with who the hell is going to end up P2 in the Constructors' battle? Is it going to be Ferrari? Is it going to be Mercedes? P2 in the Constructors' Championship still very much at play. The Silver Arrows and the Scuderia separated by just a single championship point with 4 Grand Prix Sundays left, with 2 more sprint formats to go. And neither car has really been developed for some time this year as we walk into 2026, the big regulation change. But there are still plenty of things to kind of sink your teeth into here. There's still a lot of storylines to really pull yourself into, right? George Russell's been arguably one of the best drivers of this entire Formula One season. He's been incredibly reliable for Mercedes this season. What he's been able to do in this car still technically, mathematically in the championship fight with 4 races to go. In my opinion, you could argue he's the second best driver of this season. What he's done is anchored Mercedes into this battle. On the other side of the spectrum, you've got Kimi Antonelli. You've got a rookie Formula One driver, 18, started the season, 19 years old, getting his bearings, some of his first experiences at a number of these circuits this year. Kimi Antonelli really feels like the make or break for Mercedes the rest of the way, with 6 more point scoring opportunities. What is the Italian rookie going to bring to the table? What can he bring to Mercedes in terms of championship production? What kind of a factor can he really play this season? He kind of is the make or break for Mercedes in his ability to finish in front of either one of the red Ferraris. But on top of that, staying in the points, driving mistake-free, capitalizing on opportunities, and making as much of a positive gain as you possibly can. Because for Mercedes, with a massive factory behind them, a lot of investors, for them, they're looking at this as millions, tens of millions of dollars, tens of millions of euros, of pounds, whatever, tens of millions of dollars in prize dollars that are going to go towards bonuses, that are going to go towards checks, that are going to go towards incentives. So for Mercedes, they've got a lot to play with. They've got a lot to race for. Now, you could argue maybe falling P3 isn't necessarily the worst. The better you produce, the worse your wind tunnel time is, the less opportunity you get to, exploit the aerodynamic package that you have going into 2026. Performance gains, but at the end of the day, this is still a money sport. Return on investment is a huge player here. I think a lot of what Mercedes has in the garage is going to hinge on their Italian rookie. On the other side of this battle, you got the Scuderia, you've got Charles Leclerc, you've got the 7-time world champion in Lewis Hamilton. And arguably, their consistency is what has kept them in this championship battle. Mercedes arguably have had a much better car over the course of this season, but they've been able to find opportunities to capitalize on point scoring opportunities where Mercedes has dropped the ball, where maybe even George Russell or for certain Kimi Antonelli has at certain points this season dropped the ball. When it comes to Mercedes maybe making botches on strategy or engine failures or Kimi Antonelli having rookie moments, Ferrari have steadily stayed in this picture, and that's resulted in them being in this championship fight in second place currently in these Constructors Championships with that 1-point margin. But you understand at a certain level, 1 point, it's basically an even playing field. What are going to be the major makes or breaks for Ferrari, at the end of the day, it's probably going to be the 7-time world champion, Lewis Hamilton. How much of a grip does he have on this car that they are not developing, that they are not reinforcing with new upgrades? What is going to be the make or break for Ferrari in this? Charles is maximizing everything he possibly can for the Scuderia, but Lewis Hamilton coming to grips, qualifying well, qualifying at places where he has, of course, won in the past. Performance has to be there for Lewis Hamilton, who has this year been very up and down. The best performance he's had this season, a sprint victory in China, but outside of that, still yet to find the podium officially on a Sunday for Ferrari. As far as what's going to come down these final 4 Grand Prix Sundays, these final 6 point scoring formats, I mean, with cars unlikely to change, setup success is really going to be key. I mean, with the 2 more sprints to go, Brazil and Qatar, only 1 practice session opportunity to really nail your setup either of those given weekends. Mistake-free driving. This is the element, again, that's going to come down to the rookie, Kimi Antonelli, in comparison to George Russell, in comparison to Charles Leclerc, in comparison to Lewis Hamilton, the decades of combined experience, the championship pedigrees of all 3 of these drivers, of course, only one of them being one of the greatest of all time, and Lewis Hamilton has actually secured the top step. It's been a very Verstappen-dominated era, but you could very certainly make the case that Charles Leclerc or a George Russell could very well be fighting for championships in the near future. They would be fighting for championships if the cars were correct. Executing and qualifying and converting on Sundays is going to be the name of the game for all 4 of these drivers, for both of these teams. Strong strategy calls, mixed conditions are very possible, especially as we walk into this upcoming weekend in Brazil. Yellow flags, red flags, incidents, taking advantage of those opportunities. Those are going to be the name of the game for these 2 teams, for these 4 drivers, for all these members of the strategy teams who are going to have to make decisions on the fly. You never know what could happen, especially with what we saw last year in Brazil. The only thing that was for certain last year was Max Verstappen dominance. The only thing that we knew was going to happen, that we could see happen, that felt like a certainty, was a Max Verstappen top step last year. The guy was excellent in the rain, but if you're a Mercedes, again, or Ferrari, you got to take advantage of every single one of these opportunities. What else is there to talk about? What other headlines are there to cover? Well, this P6 championship in the Constructors, is very much so up for grabs. Red Bull have locked up P4. Williams P5. Of course, McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes are fighting, McLaren have already locked up the Constructors, so 2 and 3 we just talked about are very much so up for grabs. But what level of millions of dollars in prize money, bonuses, incentives are still left to be decided for a number of teams down the stretch? Racing Bulls, Aston Martin, Haas, Stakes / Sauber F1, whatever they're going by. It's last year, then they're going to be outing next year. Constructors' places are all on the line. 12 points separating these 4 teams. Currently, VCARB sit atop P6 at 72 points, Aston Martin P7 at 69 points, Haas P8 with 62, and the Sauber unit P9 with 60. The interesting aspect of this battle is the role that the 3 rookies within these teams are going to play in deciding how their teams finish. VCARB's Isaac Hadjar, Ali Behrman for Haas, Gabriel Bortoleto for Stake, to me, are going to be the biggest factors for their respective teams in this championship fight for P6 on down. Again, millions in prize money, stakeholder investments, key figures of personnel are all riding on these final 4 weekends results. And maybe you're asking yourself, well, what about Alpine? Are they a factor in this? I mean, if they have a really, really, really lucky break like they did last year in Brazil, they can climb that championship order, but they're currently behind the Audi unit with 60 points. They're trailing them by 40. They would need a incredible weekend to come back into this mix. They need a lot to go wrong for the guys ahead in front of them. But for Racing Bulls, with your 3-point advantage, what do you have to do to kind of hold on to this championship? Realistically, it's just letting Isaac Hadjar do what he's doing. Isaac's been one of the best performers in Q3 across this entire season. He's my favorite rookie as far as performance this season. He's been the most consistent. He's been terrific. And what he's been bringing to the table for VCARB this season has been nothing short of exceptional. Across from him, you've got Liam Lawson, who's a bit more of a veteran, not as savvy as maybe Fernando Alonso, of course, but he's been in this game for quite a bit. And after starting the year with the senior Red Bull team, he's really kind of come into his own since being demoted down to VCARB, outperformed, his replacement with Red Bull and Yuki, which we'll talk about in a few moments. But for those two, they have a strong driver pairing. The car so far this year has been there. And for VCARB, realistically, you just got to take the opportunities that are in front of you. You have the advantage. You've got the two solid drivers, the guys who aren't going to make loads of mistakes. They're still going to have their moments, of course, but they're not going to make loads of mistakes. At the end of it all, I think that VCARB are, of course, in a very, very strong position. Aston Martin in P7, trailing by just 3 points, mind you. Fernando Alonso, of course, is always going to be a factor. Lance Stroll, he can find his way into some points weekends. I'm not going to give Lance Stroll too little credit. He has shown himself to be at least a decent driver at times. His bad weekends, though, of course, are pretty rough. Aston Martin, though, they're looking towards 2026. Anything that they can do to not finish towards the bottom of the pecking order for them, it's a wash of a season. We're moving forward. We're looking towards the new Adrian Newey years. He's all, he's developing their 2026 cars and beyond. But for Aston Martin, what they're going to need really is Fernando Alonso to kind of outperform the expectations. Right now, he's kind of hovering around points. Fernando Alonso is currently in 12th place in the Drivers' Championship and the Drivers' Standings with 37 points. What you need out of Fernando Alonso is to kind of, fight his way through some of the order, pick up a few more points than maybe were expected on any given weekend. And really, you're just trying to find enough to kind of close that gap and then maybe start to walk a little bit further away with it. I don't think VCARB and Aston Martin are going to necessarily stray too much further ahead of one another. But if you're Aston Martin, that's what you need. Haas sitting at 62 points, 10 points behind Racing Bulls. What do they need to make this interesting? Honestly, I think they need another Ollie Behrman weekend. Ollie, with that P4 that he had in Mexico to snag a nice 10-point boost, brought them up to P8 in this Constructors Championship. You do need a little bit of luck on your side. If you're Haas, if you're Sauber, you need a little bit of luck on your side from either of your drivers. You need some things to kind of just fall your way. 12 points isn't an insurmountable lead if maybe you're a Mercedes or a Red Bull or a Ferrari, but when you're fighting down the pecking order, every single point matters. Haas, they feel a little bit further back, but we've seen some things just kind of, sometimes you just have these races that devolve and they just kind of go your way. For them, I think the reality of it is just making sure you're finishing as close to the points as possible. Behrman's been one of the most consistent drivers of this season. And I don't see any reason why Esteban Ocon couldn't possibly give you a double points weekend as well. He's a very, solid, veteran driver. And then inversely, looking down the final bit of this order, looking at the Sauber unit, the Kick Sauber unit, Nico Hülkenberg's got loads and loads and loads of experience. He's outperformed expectations massively at points this season. Similarly, with Gabriel Bortoleto, their rookie. But for them, it just feels a little bit out of bounds. They're 12 points behind VCARB. They would need a little bit of luck to go their way as well. They would need a really big performance. Brazil, home race for Gabriel Bortoleto. You can't entirely count it out. It's not impossible to say that he might have a really good weekend, but Kick Sauber, I think that their fight right now is a little bit more directly with Haas. I think that them reaching up maybe to fight with VCARB might feel a little bit optimistic, if not ambitious, at this stage of the season. And once again, Alpine just a little bit too far back. They are currently 52 points behind VCARB. They would need a couple of incredible weekends to go their way. Excuse me. Need a little hydrate there. But the championship battle for P6, that's going to remain. It's going to remain one of the focal points as we continue to move forward with the rest of this season. One more point of emphasis I did want to talk about is the question of Red Bull's driver lineup. Last week, I took a lot of time to talk about what Alpine were doing with their second seat, and and Franco Colapinto's fans were pretty loud in the comments section that I didn't sing Franco's praises enough. And admittedly, yeah, it looks like he's going to be getting somewhat of an extension to move forward, get a confirmation to move forward in the 2026. But there are another couple of teams who have yet to declare their driver lineups in full. Red Bull and VCARB, the Racing Bulls team, yet to make any official announcements. Obviously, those would be hopefully coming sometime soon, but there is still that bit of ambiguity. There is still that question up in the air. I've talked about this driver lineup situation. I've done my general predictions over the course of this season, and I still think it's a really interesting storyline to follow because we still don't have a ton of certainty here. For Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda, these two drivers have a considerable amount of pressure on their shoulders. These two need to prove that they deserve to remain in the Red Bull fold. Liam, of course, being sent back to VCARB after 2 Grand Prix weekends to open the 2025 season. Then Yuki Tsunoda, he just has not performed well in comparison to what Liam Lawson has done since. Only 2 points separate these two, with Lawson having the 2-point advantage. And arguably, maybe an easier car to drive with VCARB, but a car that can perform at such greater heights, that can win races. We've seen from, of course, Max Verstappen. Yuki Tsunoda has not really met the expectation that I think some people were having for him. There were a lot of spurned fans at the beginning of this year that believed that Yuki Tsunoda, through all means, deserved the drive. He got the drive, and he's since had a couple of weekends that's inspired some hope, but nothing that's come close to a podium, nothing that's really come close to a P5. I want to say his best result this year might just be a P7. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But Yuki's highs have not been excellent this year. Of course, in comparison to what Max Verstappen does, it's really hard to gauge what that would look like. So many terrific drivers have come and gone alongside Max Verstappen. But at the end of the day, if the car is shown that it can deliver more, you're expected to do more. And Yuki just hasn't quite done that this year. Not to hate on Yuki, I like the guy. But this ongoing turnstile of teammates next to Max Verstappen has effectively been a headline for years and years and years now. In the senior team, of course, it's going to be Max Verstappen driving for Red Bull in 2026. That was confirmed by him, by members of his team, by members of the Red Bull team as well. But I believe by season's end, it's going to be Isaac Hadjar as the driver too. Seeing what Isaac's done this year, he's been nothing short of inspirational in a certain sense. He's exceeded expectations. Grabbed a podium in the Netherlands, with a little bit of luck, but he still was in the right position, P4, to grab that DNF'd open spot left behind by Lando Norris. And he's performed incredibly well. Talking about where he is in the pecking order, Isaac Hadjar is currently sitting P10 in this year's driver's standings with 39 points. He's been terrific. And imagining the reset in 2026 could very well be favorable for an Isaac Hadjar, who, even if you're driving alongside Max being Max, that's one conversation. But the cars are going to be effectively blank slates that are going to have to work alongside both drivers. And if Max Verstappen is in the long-term future, you have to feel comfortable with one of these guys to move forward with. And I think of all your options right now, Isaac Hadjar is giving you the most hope, giving you the most promise, giving you the most potential. As far as what's going to happen with the junior team, seems to be poised to promote, Red Bull Academy driver Arvid Lindblad from Formula 2. A strong push from senior advisor Helmut Marko has been reportedly taking place behind the scenes to get the young British-Swedish driver in the seat, giving him the opportunity. Who could be next to him is what feels like a bit more of the debate. I have a feeling it's going to remain Liam Lawson. After his bounce back in form in a car that seems to be a bit more comfortable for him, I think for VCARB, it's just going to be a matter of comfortability. Why change something that's working? And Yuki Tsunoda, I think, just seems poised for an exit. He feels like the odd man out, unless he decides he wants to stay with the Red Bull family at some capacity as some kind of a reserve. I would be surprised if Yuki was demoted back to VCARB, especially given the years and years and years of experience he's gotten. especially because Isaac Hadjar just feels a little bit undeniable. I mean, Isaac's, of course, had his moments this year, but I just think on pure potential, Isaac could deliver more. And it feels like Yuki's just kind of poised for an exit. The Honda partnership's moving to Aston Martin beginning in 2026. There's going to be a lot of questions about whether or not he is available as a reserve driver for them. If maybe he decides to go outside of the Honda ranks to try to remain as close to a Formula One seat as possible. But I hate to say it because I think Yuki's a good guy. Obviously, he brings a lot of fanfare. But I just had this feeling that he's going to feel like he's going to end up being this odd man out when all is said and done. There really isn't an obvious home for Yuki Tsunoda as it stands, unless Red Bull just decide we're going to go with what we got. We're going to let it run into 2026, which to be completely honest, I feel like that might be a bit of a mistake. Because you have the opportunity, again, to hit this hard reset, get Isaac Hadjar with the senior Red Bull team in a position where he gets comfortable working with the senior Red Bull team, working again with Lauren Meckies, working with Helmut Marko, working with the engineering staff and the personnel that you have at Red Bull in an off season, walking into next season and going, look, Max Verstappen's on the fence about staying. Red Bull, we're a big brand. You could be the face of that brand. All you got to do is do your thing, kid. Don't put it in the wall. Score good points, but prove you belong here. This is a blank slate car. We can start building it towards what you like. So I just think this is a perfect opportunity for Red Bull to really hit the reset button. It's already hard enough to throw a guy into a seat next to Max Verstappen mid-regulation. We've seen that from a number of different drivers. The cars get developed away from other drivers at times. But if you're going to do it, if you're going to hit the reset button, it feels like 2026 is going to be that time. So what other questions do you guys have for the rest of the season? Is there something that I missed? What else are you guys curious about? Do you think Ferrari or Mercedes are going to take P2? Which team takes the P6 spot on down? Who is in this Red Bull seat beginning next year? What do the teams look like? What are Yuki Tsunoda's options? What are his fates? What do you guys think? I want to know what the TLPs think down in the comments below. I'm really curious to see what you guys think and what your insights are. And honestly, where do you see the rest of the season going? We've got a lot of racing left to go. There's a lot of other storylines other than just the World Drivers' Championship on the line, which if you're curious about that, like I said, check out last week's episode, or I outlined that in a specific video as well. There's plenty to chew on with that subject matter. I'm really excited for this Brazilian Grand Prix weekend. Of course, that's going to be the headline everywhere you look, but there's still a lot more going on this season rather than just one major storyline.